If everyone here were to check their heart rate right now, it would probably be resting somewhere between 60 and 80 beats per minute. That's the average resting heart rate for the healthy adult or teenager. When exercising or working out, the average heart rate would rest probably somewhere between 150 to 185 beats per minute, but it usually wouldn't exceed that. When you're younger, your heart can typically perform at a higher rate than when you're older. These are obviously just general numbers, and each person's body and heart is different. When I was first born, I passed all the initial tests performed to ensure a healthy baby. When the nurses took me into a different room to test me, however, my dad felt like I'd been gone for too long, so he went looking for me. One of the nurses informed him that while I was being inspected, I had gone into supraventricular tachycardia, or SVT. SVT is defined as a faster than normal heart rate beginning above the heart's two lower chambers. Supraventricular tachycardia is a rapid heartbeat that develops when the normal electrical impulses of the heart are disrupted. My first episode occurred just minutes after I was born, and my heart rate reached just above 250 beats per minute. The doctors informed my dad they'd given me the medicine adenosine, which is a substance administered to help restore a normal heartbeat to people with certain types of irregular heartbeats. The problem was that the adenosine caused my heart to drop from 250 to 50 beats per minute in a matter of seconds, plummeting far too low and putting too much unnatural stress on my tiny new heart. I needed to stay in the NICU, the newborn intensive care unit, so the doctors could monitor me to ensure the adenosine wore off and I was left unharmed, which it did. SVT doesn't usually go away on its own, and if it does, it's usually later on in life. Obviously, my parents were made aware of how to handle my situation, and if I were to have an episode, what their response should be. While SVT happens randomly, there are some triggers that can increase the likelihood of an episode. Not eating enough, becoming dehydrated, consuming too much caffeine, and overworking my body athletically are some of the personal triggers I've learned. I had episodes more frequently when I was younger, and my parents became really good at knowing my body and what some of the warning signs were. They could usually tell how I was feeling, and they made sure to keep me away from any of those triggers. Even with this intense awareness, nothing could prepare them for a family vacation to Maine. My family at the time was made up of only 3, as my little brother Timmy hadn't yet been born. We spent the day at the beach, hiking, or out on the boat. I was 3.5 years old, a toddler, so everything was totally normal when we returned back to the house and my mom went to put me down for a nap. Usually at this point in the day, my dad would go fishing. However, that day he made the decision to stay home. It certainly changed my life. Up the spiral staircase my mom and I went, as little me was sleeping in the loft. Reaching the top of the stairs, I turned to her and told her I didn't feel well. She replied with calming phrases like, "Oh, you're just tired, you need to take a nap, and everything will be fine." I persistently told her I felt sick, and she soon believed me when I put my hand to my mouth, my eyes rolled back, and my body went stiff as I turned gray and passed out unresponsive. My mom immediately screamed, and Dad came running up the staircase, grabbed me, and laid me on the ground where he says I exhaled without any inhale. Reaching for a pulse and feeling nothing, he began desperately performing CPR. I remained unresponsive and unconscious. The house we were staying at had no landline phone and there was no cell service, as it was pretty remote. As Dad was performing CPR, my mom was yelling for help, and with no response, she ended up going into another cabin to call 911. When my mom returned from the phone call, Dad had me in his arms, and I was revived but still gray, not yet out of the woods. The police were the first to arrive, and the officer told my dad to bring me into the back of the cop car. The freezing air conditioning, loud radio, and bright lights were enough to overwhelm me to the point of tears, and only when I cried did I finally regain color. I was brought to the hospital where tons of tests and EKGs were performed, however nothing turned up. To this day, we still don't know exactly what happened, although it's easy to infer it had something to do with my heart, as I'd flatlined at one point. If we're being honest, I remember very little of that. Being on the phone with my parents and hearing them recounting the story was pretty heartbreaking. My mom still says it's the scariest day of her life. I've had many more episodes from then to now, however, none as serious and potentially fatal as that one. When I reached middle school age, I don't remember any problems, almost as if my SVT went dormant. When I first came to Brooks as a freshman, the entire health center staff and athletic trainers were made aware of my situation. It was a little embarrassing to me at first, having to meet with various people to ensure we were all on the same page. You know how freshmen are. They don't want any extra attention from anyone, and definitely not about what makes them different. Quickly realized this wasn't anything to be afraid of or ashamed of. It was about my body and making sure the people around me were prepared and equipped to help me with whatever I needed. I'm so fortunate to have this unique environment where the people taking care of me know me so well. The way SVT episodes occur and regulate so randomly is pretty frustrating and confusing for me. I work really hard to take care of myself, and when episodes occur just as randomly as they go away, I find myself becoming annoyed. For me, the hospital can be tolerated as long as I have someone there to support me. While the idea of hospitals gives me anxiety, I know if I'm ever there, I'll always have someone who cares about me there to help calm my nerves. It's usually my parents. However, last year I had a special, unexpected guest join me. During hockey season, I had an episode that required hospitalization. Came out of pretty much nowhere during another typical practice. I had already lifted that day before I got on the ice. In retrospect, probably not the best decision. I was on the ice for maybe 5 minutes when my heart began to beat too fast. I wear an Apple Watch, and as long as it's on my wrist, it will consistently track my heart rate and store it as data that can be found in my phone. During this practice, I was wearing my watch, and this time when it felt too high, I was able to quickly check and see it was resting around 220 beats per minute. Potentially the scariest thing that happens when I have an episode is the way my whole body shakes with each and every heartbeat. My heart pounds throughout my whole body, and it quickly consumes my senses, becoming the only thing I can focus on. Once again, I waited to see if it would regulate itself, and it didn't. I ended up getting off the ice and sitting down, beginning to do the breathing exercises I've been taught to help calm myself. Kim, who works in the health center, was there randomly, and when she noticed me sitting in the chair, hunched over in full equipment, she immediately knew what was going on. She stayed with me, but also alerted the trainers and Mrs. C in the health center. Eventually, while my team was on the ice, I ended up surrounded by Mr. King and Miss McDowell, our trainers, Kim and Mrs. C from the health center, and Holmes, my coach, even for a little while. We were constantly checking my watch, and when my heart rate had stayed between 210 and 230 for around 20 minutes, Mrs. C made the decision to call the ambulance. The news that an ambulance was coming pushed me further into frustration and anxiety. I also hate all the attention an ambulance being on campus brings, as all of us know. When the medics came, they put me on a stretcher and brought me into the back of the ambulance, still in full hockey equipment. In the rink parking lot, they hooked me up to an IV, which was also traumatizing, as I hate needles, and told me they were going to give me medicine. I was in tears, both scared and concerned, when the EMT so kindly told me to stop crying, you're 17. The medicine they gave me was adenosine, and it was one of the strangest feelings I've ever experienced. I didn't remember it much when I was younger, but I will certainly remember it now. It was a warm, numbing sensation beginning in my arm and traveling up my neck, creeping in and creating a tight feeling. Its warmth moved throughout my whole body, and for a split second, suddenly, my heart rate stopped. It then reset back to around 80 beats per minute. You can imagine the change from a body shaking 230 to 80 in less than a second, and how utterly terrifying it was. I can honestly say that at that moment I thought I was going to die, like they'd given me the wrong medicine or something. After I was restored to normal, the EMTs made sure I was okay, and we were off to the hospital. I was hooked up to lots of machines in the back of the ambulance, constantly monitoring my heart with EKGs. When we got to the hospital, I was brought into a room where I removed my upper equipment to put on a Johnny so they could hook me up to more tests. Shortly after, the teacher who just so happened to be on ER duty walked in that night, the boys' basketball coach who I'd seen around campus but had never really met. He immediately came over and made sure I was okay and reassured me that everything would be fine. My phone had recently died, so he snapped a photo of me looking my absolute best and texted it to my parents, who were already on their way, to show them that I was stable and in great hands. Little did I know this was the start of one of the most influential relationships I would have during my time at Brooks. Mr. McVeigh and I really bonded that night, and he learned all about my life, my family, friends, sports, and everything in between. In turn, I learned about him, his amazing wife and family, how he came to Brooks, basketball, and Cooper, his adorable chocolate lab, who I have the privilege of walking every now and then. Listening to Mr. McVeigh talk so highly about everyone around him, how much he loved his wife and family, and how deeply he cared about his players, he reminded me a lot of my dad, and it made me realize he was someone I wanted to surround myself with. When my mom arrived a few hours later, I'd been stable for a while, so the doctors were allowing me to go back to school for the night, as long as I stayed in the health center. While I felt fine in the days following, I had my coaches, trainers, and nurses all checking in on me, as well as my amazing chaperone, who I remember sent me the most thoughtful text. Since that episode, I visited my cardiologist, and I've been prescribed a blister pack of atenolol, which is a medication that helps regulate irregular heartbeats. I now always carry one of these pills with me in the back of my phone case. My head coach for all 3 of the sports I play are all administered a pill, and the trainers in health center have some as well. I also always wear my watch, constantly tracking my heartbeat. It helps me feel prepared and supported to know so many people around me are looking out for me and are ready to handle any situation I may throw at them. While I can't control my heart, I can control the way I let it impact me mentally, and whether or not I let something like this hold me back or make me embarrassed. While most people probably wouldn't look at SVT as a blessing, I can name a few things I'm grateful for as a result. The first is how I've been granted the opportunity to talk about something that makes me unique, hopefully empowering other people to do the same. Secondly, my family, and understanding my parents will always know how to help me, no matter the situation. The third is the relationships I've been able to build with my SVT as a common foundation. The nurses and athletic trainers at Brooks have been crucial not only in supporting me, but also further helping me understand how and why my body works the way that it does. Finally, I'm grateful for Mr. McVeigh and all he's taught me. He's always a positive, smiling face walking down Main Street and never forgets to check in with me or give me a fist bump. He's been a key influence over me over the last year or so and acted as a father figure for me being away from home. When I saw I'd been selected to take Oratory with Mr. McVeigh, I was absolutely over the moon as I knew I would have an amazing experience and in the process learn a lot. Similar to how SVT was randomly assigned to me, faculty are randomly assigned to ER duty, and I couldn't be more thankful that on February 15th, it was Mr. McVeigh. Thank you.